I exposed my wife's public domination routine, ended her humiliation games at a family dinner, forced accountability, and reclaimed my power completely. She's establishing dominance. She has no idea what's coming next. Let me tell you how my wife learned that real power doesn't come from putting others down. It started 3 months ago at what should have been a simple dinner with friends. We were sitting around the table, good food, good company, when the conversation turned to home renovations. I mentioned we were thinking about redoing the kitchen, and that's when she struck. "Well, if you actually knew what you were doing with tools, we might have started by now," she said, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world I'd ever heard. The table went quiet for a second before nervous laughter filled the air. I looked at her, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Interesting perspective." Then I continued talking about the renovation plans like nothing had happened. But something had shifted, not in me, but in how I viewed what was happening. See, I'd been married to this woman for 4 years. She'd always been strong-willed, confident, never afraid to speak her mind. I respected that about her. But this wasn't confidence anymore. This was something else entirely. 2 weeks later, at her sister's birthday party, she did it again. We were discussing vacation plans when she interrupted me mid-sentence. "He never plans anything properly anyway. Last time he booked us a hotel, we ended up next to construction work." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "I handle all the real planning now." Her sister looked uncomfortable. Her brother-in-law cleared his throat, but she was just getting started. "He's lucky I'm organized. Otherwise, we'd probably be homeless by now," she continued, gesturing at me like I was some kind of charity case she'd taken on. I smiled and said, "Well, someone's feeling chatty tonight." The sarcasm wasn't lost on anyone, including her. She shot me a look that could have frozen water, but I wasn't backing down anymore. What really got to me wasn't just the words, it was the pattern. Every social gathering became her opportunity to establish some kind of hierarchy with me at the bottom. She'd correct me in front of people, contradict statements I made, or just flat out dismiss my opinions like they didn't matter. The breaking point came at my cousin's wedding reception. Beautiful venue, everyone dressed up, celebrating love and commitment. We were talking with relatives I hadn't seen in years, catching up, when the conversation turned to careers and achievements. I was telling them about a project I'd been working on, something I was genuinely proud of, when she cut me off completely. "Oh, please, you're making it sound way more important than it actually is." She turned to my relatives with a condescending smile. He tends to exaggerate his role in things. The silence that followed was deafening. My cousin's wife looked mortified. My uncle actually looked angry on my behalf. But my wife? She was smiling like she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest joke. That's when I realized what was really happening. This wasn't about her being strong or confident. This was about her needing to feel superior, and she'd chosen me as her stepping stone. Every public humiliation was her way of climbing higher by pushing me down. I excused myself, walked to the bar, not to drink my sorrows away, but to think. I'd reached a decision point. I could either accept this as my new reality, or I could do something about it. When I returned to the table, she was still holding court, probably telling everyone another way I'd disappointed her that week. I sat down, listened for a moment, then looked directly at her. "Are you done?" I asked quietly. She paused mid-sentence, clearly not expecting the interruption. "Excuse me?" "I asked if you were done because I'd like to finish telling them about my project, if that's all right with you." The table went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head, but I didn't look away. "Actually," I continued, still holding eye contact, "I think they're perfectly capable of deciding for themselves whether my work is important or not. They don't need a translator." Her face went through about 5 different shades of red, but she didn't say anything. She couldn't. Everyone was watching, and she knew exactly how this looked. I turned back to my relatives and finished my story in a normal tone, like nothing had happened. But everything had changed, and she knew it. The ride home was interesting. She tried the silent treatment first, then moved to accusations. I was embarrassing her, being disrespectful, making her look bad in front of people. I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and looked at her. "You want to talk about making someone look bad in front of people? Really?" She started to argue, but I was already out of the car and heading inside. The conversation was over. But the real work was just beginning. I'd realized that night that she'd been testing me, pushing boundaries, seeing how much disrespect I'd tolerate before I pushed back. And for months, I'd been failing those tests spectacularly. Tests work both ways. It was time for me to start administering a few of my own. After the wedding incident, I thought maybe she'd gotten the message. I was wrong, dead wrong. 3 weeks later, my company hosted its annual holiday party. Nice venue, open bar, all department heads and spouses invited. I'd been looking forward to it because a major client proposal I'd led was getting serious attention from upper management. We walked in together, she in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's rent, me in my best suit. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. She was charming to my colleagues. I actually thought we'd turned a corner. Then the regional manager started talking to me about the proposal. "So tell me about this new approach you've developed," he said. "I've been hearing good things from your department head." I was about to respond when she jumped in. "Oh, this should be good," she said with a laugh that made my stomach drop. "He's been obsessing over this thing for weeks. Honestly, I think he's overthinking it." The regional manager looked confused. I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice level. "Actually, I think the research phase has been pretty thorough." "Research phase," she repeated, making air quotes. "He calls it research. I call it procrastination." The man could research the color of grass for 6 months and still not be sure it's green. A few other people had gathered by now, including my direct supervisor. The regional manager was trying to stay polite, but he was clearly uncomfortable. "Well," I said, keeping my tone neutral, "I suppose everyone has their own definition of thorough preparation," but she wasn't done. "The thing is, he gets so caught up in the details that he misses the big picture. Last month, he spent 3 hours organizing his desk drawers instead of just throwing out what he didn't need. I had to practically drag him away from it." My supervisor's eyebrows shot up. The regional manager was now actively looking for an escape route. "That's fascinating," I said, turning to look at her directly. "I wasn't aware you'd become an expert in project management. When did that happen?" Her smile faltered for a split second. "I'm just saying sometimes an outside perspective helps." "An outside perspective," I repeated. "Right, because you've been so involved in the day-to-day work on this proposal." The group had gone quiet. "I don't need to be involved in every little detail to see when someone's spinning their wheels," she shot back. "No," I agreed. "You just need to be involved enough to have an opinion worth sharing." Which brings up an interesting question about tonight's commentary. She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't finished. "Excuse me," I said to the group. "I think my wife needs some air. We'll be right back." I didn't wait for her agreement. I placed my hand on her elbow and guided her toward the patio. She came along, probably because making a scene would have been worse. Once we were outside and out of earshot, she exploded. "What the hell was that? You made me look like an idiot in there." "I made you look like an idiot?" I stared at her. "Are you serious right now? You were being condescending and rude." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you have any idea what you just did in there?" I was making conversation. "You were sabotaging me in front of my boss and the regional manager at a company function where my career is on the line." She crossed her arms. "I was just being honest about what I see at home." "What you see at home is me working on something important while you watch reality TV and complain I'm not paying enough attention to you." Her eyes went wide. I'd never been this direct before, and she wasn't ready for it. "But here's what's really interesting," I continued. "You waited until I was talking to the most important people in my company to share your insights. Funny how that timing always works out." "I didn't plan." "Of course you did. Just like you planned it at the wedding. Just like at the dinner party. You wait for the moment I can't fight back without looking like the bad guy. Then you strike." She was quiet, trying to figure out how to turn this around. "I'm your wife," she finally said. "I should be able to express my opinion." "Express your opinion?" "Yes." "Humiliate me to advance your own social status?" "No. That's not what I'm doing." "Then, what would you call it?" She didn't have an answer, which was answer enough. We went back inside, but the damage was done. The regional manager had moved on. My supervisor gave me a sympathetic look when he thought she wasn't watching. People's eyes followed us for the rest of the night. The drive home was silent until we were almost there. "I think you're overreacting," she said finally. I pulled into the garage and turned off the engine. "I think you're testing me." "Testing you? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you keep pushing to see what I'll tolerate. And tonight you found out." I got out of the car and went inside, leaving her sitting there. The testing phase was over. Now came consequences. The next morning she acted like nothing had happened. Made coffee, asked about my day, the whole domestic routine. but I could see it in her eyes. She was waiting to see if I'd pretend the party never happened. I wasn't in a pretending mood. "We need to talk," I said over breakfast. "About what?" "About last night. About what's been happening for months." "I don't know what you mean." I set down my coffee cup and looked at her directly. "Really? We're going to play dumb now?" She shrugged. "If you're upset, just say it." "All right, I'm upset that my wife thinks it's acceptable to humiliate me in front of my colleagues. I'm upset she's made a habit of cutting me down in public, and I'm really upset that when confronted she pretends it never happened." Her defensive walls shot up. "I wasn't humiliating you. I was just being honest." "Honest about what exactly?" "That you think I'm incompetent?" "I never said that. You didn't have to. Your little performance last night made it crystal clear what you think of me." She stood and started clearing dishes, trying to end the conversation through activity. "You're being dramatic." I made a few comments. Big deal. A few comments that could have cost me a promotion, in front of the people who determine my career trajectory. If your career is that fragile, maybe the problem isn't what I said. Something cold settled in my chest. This was exactly what I'd expected. Deflection, blame shifting, anything to avoid responsibility. "So, it's my fault now. I'm just saying if you were more confident in your abilities, a little teasing wouldn't bother you so much." "Teasing," I repeated slowly. "Is that what we're calling it?" She turned, dish towel in hand, looking at me like I was an unreasonable child. "What would you call it?" "Sabotage. Manipulation. A power play designed to make you feel important by making me look small." Her expression flickered, surprised I'd called it out so directly. "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've decided our marriage works better when I'm the incompetent one, and you're the long-suffering wife who has to manage me. Someone does need to have some control in this relationship." There it was. The truth, finally out in the open. "Control," I said. Interesting word choice. "I'm just being practical. You get distracted, you overthink things, you need guidance sometimes. And you've appointed yourself my guide. I'm your wife. Supposed to support me, not tear me down in front of other people." She threw the dish towel on the counter. "I'm not tearing you down. I'm being a strong woman who isn't afraid to speak her mind." I stood and walked over to her. "Let me ask you something. Do strong women need to diminish their husbands to feel powerful?" "I'm not diminishing you." "Then what do you call it when you interrupt me to tell people I'm incompetent? When you contradict everything I say in public? When you make me the punchline of your jokes?" She was quiet, trying to formulate a response that would still make this my fault. "Maybe if you acted more like a man, I wouldn't have to..." "Wouldn't have to what?" "Finish that sentence." She realized she'd gone too far. "You want me to act more like a man?" I asked quietly. "Because a real man doesn't tolerate disrespect from anyone, including his wife." "I'm not disrespecting you." "Then what would you call last night?" "I call it having an opinion. An opinion you felt compelled to share at the worst possible moment, in the worst possible way, in front of the worst possible people." She crossed her arms. "I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells around you." "Nobody's asking you to walk on eggshells. I'm asking you to show the same basic respect in public that you'd show a stranger. That's different." "How?" "Because you're my husband. I should be able to be honest with you." "Honest, yes. Publicly humiliating, no. There's a difference." She was running out of arguments, and we both knew it. "Look," she said, switching to her negotiation voice. "Maybe I got carried away last night. But you embarrassed me too, pulling me outside like that. I embarrassed you by stopping you from embarrassing me further. You made it look like I was a problem that needed to be handled." I stared at her for a long moment. "Were you not being a problem that needed to be handled?" The question hung between us. "Here's what's going to happen," I said finally. "This pattern stops now. No more public humiliation. No more cutting me down in front of other people. No more treating me like your incompetent little brother who needs management." "Or what?" she challenged. "Or you'll find out what happens when someone who's been playing defense decides to play offense instead." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise. You want to test boundaries? Congratulations. You found the limit." I picked up my coffee and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" "To work, where I'll spend the day doing damage control from your little performance last night." This conversation isn't over. Actually, it is. The talking part is done. Now we move to the demonstration part. 2 weeks later, her parents invited us to a big family dinner. Her brother and sister-in-law would be there, her grandmother visiting from out of state, the perfect stage for her to reassert dominance in front of her support network. I knew it was coming. The only question was whether she was smart enough to recognize the trap. We arrived on time. Hugs, small talk, her mother's famous pot roast, good china, everything cheerful. For the first hour she behaved herself. Then the conversation turned to home improvements, and I saw that familiar glint in her eyes. Her father asked if we had any projects planned. I mentioned updating the bathroom. "Oh, that's optimistic," she said with a laugh, considering how long it took him to hang a single picture frame last month. The table went quiet for a beat. I swear I asked him to hang one picture in the hallway and he spent 45 minutes measuring and remeasuring to make sure it was exactly centered. I finally had to do it myself. Her grandmother chuckled politely. Her father looked unsure how to respond. I set down my fork and looked at her in the eye. "That's an interesting version of events. What do you mean?" "I mean, you asked me to hang a picture. I hung it. You didn't like where I placed it, so you moved it. That's not quite the same as doing it yourself." She waved dismissively. "The point is, it took forever for something simple." "The point is," I said calmly, "you're telling a story that makes me look incompetent, and you look like the capable one who had to save the day." The atmosphere shifted. This wasn't playful banter anymore. Her mother tried to smooth it over. "Oh, you know how these little domestic things go." "Actually," I interrupted politely, "I don't think this is about domestic things at all." I turned back to my wife. "Tell them about the company party 2 weeks ago." Her face went pale. "That's not relevant. Tell them how you interrupted my conversation with my boss to explain how incompetent I am at my job." "I didn't say—" "What did you say then?" She looked around the table for rescue, but everyone was watching. "I don't remember exactly." "I do. You said I was overthinking, procrastinating, missing the big picture. You compared me to someone who'd spend 3 hours organizing desk drawers instead of throwing things away. Ring any bells?" Her brother stared at his plate. Her sister-in-law looked horrified. Her grandmother watched with the calm of someone who'd seen many marriages nearly implode. "You're making it sound worse than it was," she said weakly. "Am the first, because it sounds like you have a pattern of telling stories that make me look like a child who needs your constant management." Her father cleared his throat. "Maybe we should—" "No," I said, still looking at my wife. "Let's finish this. Apparently we need witnesses for you to hear me." I turned to the whole table. My wife has developed a habit of publicly humiliating me. She waits for moments when I can't defend myself without looking like the bad guy, then makes comments designed to make her look superior and me look incompetent. When I've asked her to stop, she's told me I'm too sensitive, that she's just being honest, that someone needs control in our relationship. Her mother looked shocked. Her father studied his hands. Tonight she decided to do it again. Same pattern, same strategy. Make me look foolish, position herself as the long-suffering wife who has to deal with my incompetence. I stood. But here's the thing about patterns. Once you recognize them, you can break them. I looked at my wife. "You wanted to establish dominance. Congratulations. You just established that you're willing to lie about me to make yourself look good in front of your own family." Her grandmother spoke for the first time. "Young man, are you calling my granddaughter a liar?" "I'm saying she just told her family I'm incompetent at hanging pictures because it took me 45 minutes to measure properly. What I'm not saying is that she's the one who insisted it had to be perfectly centered. And when I hung it exactly where she asked, she changed her mind and moved it herself." Her grandmother turned to her. "Is that true?" "It's more complicated," she mumbled. "No," I said. "It's exactly that simple." I walked around the table to where she sat. "You wanted to test me? You wanted to see how much disrespect I'd tolerate. Well, now you know. The answer is 0. Not in public, not in private, not ever again." I picked up my jacket. Dinner was delicious. "Thank you for having us," I said to her mother and walked out. She didn't come home that night. Stayed at her parents'. Smart tactical move. Give her family time to process what they'd witnessed without me there to defend myself. I spent the evening in peace, pizza, a game, silence. No commentary, no corrections, no digs. Just quiet. She showed up the next morning, looking like she hadn't slept. "We need to talk." "About what?" "I was pretty clear last night. You humiliated me in front of my family. I told the truth about your behavior. You've been humiliating me for months. You made me look like a monster." I made you look like exactly what you are, someone who tears her husband down to feel important. She sat across from me. My father wants to talk to you. I laughed. About how I spoke to you? What about how you've been speaking to me for months? That's different. The double standard was so obvious even to her. Her phone buzzed, text from her brother and sister-in-law apologizing to me for not speaking up sooner. I showed her. Her face went white. Then her mother called. I put it on speaker. I owe you an apology, her mother said. I've watched my daughter treat you poorly for months and never said anything. That stops now. My wife's face crumpled. After we hung up, she whispered, This is all your fault. You turned my family against me. I didn't turn anyone against you. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences of your own behavior. 6 months later, everything had changed, not overnight, but gradually. The first few weeks were rough, tears, anger, bargaining, silent treatment. None of it worked because I'd stopped playing the game. When she tried a dig at a friend's barbecue 3 weeks later, I simply said, Are you done? She stopped mid-sentence and never tried again that day. Social consequences piled up. Friends declined invitations if we were both going. Her own sister pulled her aside at a birthday party and told her it made everyone uncomfortable. But the real shift came when I stopped trying to fix her and started enforcing boundaries consistently. When she made cutting remarks, I called them out immediately. When she contradicted me in public, I asked why she felt the need to correct me in front of others. The breakthrough came at her company Christmas party. Her boss was praising a project I'd consulted on when she started to interrupt with the usual "he overthinks everything." Actually, I said, cutting her off, the overthinking paid off. The campaign exceeded projections by 30%. Her boss looked impressed. She looked shocked. Later that night, she finally asked the right question. Why don't you let me get away with anything anymore? Because I realized I was teaching you how to treat me. Every time you disrespected me and I did nothing, I taught you it was acceptable. Every time I absorbed your humiliation without responding, I taught you my dignity was negotiable. She was quiet a long time. So what now? Now you know it's not, and you get to decide what kind of wife you want to be. The change didn't happen overnight, but it happened. She started catching herself. She started asking my opinion instead of dismissing it. Most importantly, she stopped treating our marriage like a competition she needed to win. Last month at her cousin's engagement party, when someone asked about our renovation, she said, He's been amazing with the planning. I never would have thought of half the details he's covered. No sarcasm, just genuine respect. Turns out constantly tearing down your partner is exhausting. When you stop fighting battles you don't need to win, you have energy for better things. People treat us differently now too. Invitations are back, conversations flow. Her family enjoys our company again. But the biggest change is in me. I'm no longer the guy who tolerates disrespect. I'm the man who knows his worth and won't accept less. From anyone, including the woman I married. You teach people how to treat you by what you accept. When you stop accepting disrespect, people stop disrespecting you. My wife learned that dominance isn't about putting others down. Real strength comes from building people up, especially the person you promised to spend your life with. She wanted to be dominant. Now she dominates her own worst impulses instead of me. Much better use of that energy. And I never had to raise my voice, make threats, or play games. I just stopped being willing to be anyone's doormat, even my wife's. Turns out that was all it took. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, thank you. I hope it helps someone out there draw their own line in the sand. Respect starts with respecting yourself. Looking back 6 months later, I sometimes catch myself staring out the kitchen window while the coffee brews, and I still feel a quiet wave of disbelief wash over me. For years I told myself I was being the bigger person, the patient husband, the guy who could take a joke. I thought swallowing the little cuts was the price of peace. Turns out peace built on constant self-erasure isn't peace at all. It's just slow suffocation. The hardest emotion to sit with wasn't anger. It was grief. I had to grieve the version of me who believed love meant absorbing disrespect forever. I had to grieve the marriage I'd become, the man who flinched inside every time we walked into a room full of people, already bracing for the next playful jab. Letting that version die felt like betraying the good husband I'd worked so hard to be. But holding the funeral for him was the only way the real me could finally breathe. There's also a strange tenderness I feel now, Almost pity, when I remember how exhausted she used to look after every social event, eyes bright with triumph, but shoulders sagging under the weight of having to win all night. Tearing someone down to feel tall is heavy work. Watching her lay that burden down has been one of the most unexpected gifts of this whole mess. Mostly, though, I feel free. Not the loud, chest-thumping kind of free, more like the quiet freedom of a man who finally knows his own worth isn't up for public negotiation. I walk into rooms now without scanning for exits. I laugh without calculating whether it will be used against me later. I love her more honestly than I ever did, because I'm no longer loving her from a crouch. If you're reading this and part of you is still crouched, still shrinking, still smiling through the sting, know this: the moment you stand up doesn't make you the villain. It makes you the man or woman who finally decided that love should feel like oxygen, not anesthesia. I'm proud of him, that man who walked out of his in-laws' dining room that night. He saved us both.